That was the sound that shattered the silence at Lakeview Wildlife Sanctuary, a voice screaming in horror, followed by the sickening splash of something massive thrashing in water. Witnesses froze, cameras dropped, children screamed, and in those seconds of chaos, one truth became crystal clear. This wasn't just an accident. This was a nightmare everyone had seen coming. The victim, a beloved senior animal trainer named Rachel Monroe. The animal, a captive Nile crocodile named Kuno, weighing over 1,200 pounds, bred and raised entirely in captivity. It happened in broad daylight, in front of visitors, during what was supposed to be a routine feeding demonstration. And now, someone was dead. But what if I told you this wasn't some freak incident? That behind the blood and tragedy lies a much darker pattern, one made up of ignored warnings, internal memos, and mounting behavioral red flags. What happened to Rachel wasn't just a fluke. It was preventable, and even worse, it was predictable. Why did nobody stop it? How did a trained, intelligent, and experienced professional end up alone, unprotected, inside a crocodile enclosure with one of the most dangerous predators on Earth? This story is more than just a tragedy. It's a reckoning, because Rachel Monroe isn't the first to die in the name of entertainment. And if nothing changes, she won't be the last. We're about to take you inside the world of wildlife parks and exotic predators, where human-animal relationships are often romanticized, warning signs are ignored, and safety comes second to spectacle. Let's rewind the clock to a time before the blood, before the screaming, back to where this all began, with a trainer who loved too much and a killer no one wanted to believe. Rachel Monroe was 34 years old, charismatic, deeply intelligent, and absolutely fearless when it came to the animals under her care. To visitors at Lakeview Wildlife Sanctuary, she was a fan favorite, always smiling, always educating, always going the extra mile to make sure guests saw not just the danger, but the beauty in every creature. But to her co-workers, Rachel was more than just a star employee. She was a lifer, someone who had dedicated her entire adult life to understanding animal psychology. A graduate in zoology with a master's in behavioral sciences, she wasn't in this for the paycheck or the public praise. She believed in something deeper. She believed they could be understood. Her favorite animal by far was Kuno, the Nile crocodile, an apex predator with a prehistoric glare and a reputation for being ... temperamental. Most staff wouldn't go near his enclosure without backup, but Rachel, she spoke about him like an old friend. He's just misunderstood, she'd say. He's not aggressive, he's reactive. She'd built a routine around Kuno: ritualized feedings, consistent enrichment, environmental cues to keep his mind stimulated. She even requested the sanctuary to install special UV lighting and deeper water areas to mimic his natural habitat. To her, Kuno wasn't a threat. He was a creature out of place, born into confinement, trying to adapt in a world that didn't make sense. But not everyone shared her confidence. Over the past year, other trainers noticed changes. Rachel had begun working with Kuno alone. She defended his outbursts. She ignored warnings. She spoke of him with affection that bordered on obsession, and still, no one intervened. Their bond was rare, intense, but it wasn't magic. It was a warning sign, one that would soon explode into the deadliest mistake of her life. Rachel Monroe was 34 years old, charismatic, deeply intelligent, and absolutely fearless when it came to the animals under her care. To visitors at Lakeview Wildlife Sanctuary, she was a fan favorite, Always smiling, always educating, always going the extra mile to make sure guests saw not just the danger, but the beauty in every creature. But to her co-workers, Rachel was more than just a star employee. She was a lifer, someone who had dedicated her entire adult life to understanding animal psychology. A graduate in zoology with a master's in behavioral sciences, she wasn't in this for the paycheck or the public praise. She believed in something deeper. She believed they could be understood. Her favorite animal by far was Kuno, the Nile crocodile, an apex predator with a prehistoric glare and a reputation for being ... temperamental. Most staff wouldn't go near his enclosure without backup, but Rachel, she spoke about him like an old friend. "He's just misunderstood," she'd say. "He's not aggressive, he's reactive." She'd built a routine around Kuno ritualized feedings, consistent enrichment, environmental cues to keep his mind stimulated. She even requested the sanctuary to install special UV lighting and deeper water areas to mimic his natural habitat. To her, Kuno wasn't a threat. He was a creature out of place, born into confinement, trying to adapt in a world that didn't make sense. She even kept a notebook just for him, documenting moods, triggers, feeding preferences, even days he seemed off. No one else did that. Not for any animal, but not everyone shared her confidence. Over the past year, other trainers noticed changes. Rachel had begun working with Kuno alone. She defended his outbursts. She ignored warnings. She spoke of him with affection that bordered on obsession, and still no one intervened. Their bond was rare, intense, but it wasn't magic. It was a warning sign, one that would soon explode into the deadliest mistake of her life. Kuno wasn't born in the wild. He came from a breeding facility in Central Florida, place designed to raise exotic animals for zoos, private collectors, and so-called sanctuaries. He was sold to Lakeview Wildlife Sanctuary when he was just 6 months old. Cute, small, containable, but Kuno didn't stay small by age 9. He was 16 feet long and weighed over 1,200 pounds. His tail alone could break a grown man's ribs. His jaws could crush bone in a single bite. And behind those cold reptilian eyes was a mind shaped by millions of years of evolution, territorial, reactive, and impossible to truly tame. He wasn't just dangerous, he was unpredictable. Crocodiles are ancient survivors, perfectly engineered predators with lightning reflexes and terrifying patience. They can stay completely motionless for hours, then explode with lethal speed in under a second. Their brains may be small, but their instincts, razor sharp, and captivity doesn't dull those instincts. It aggravates them. Over time, Kuno began showing signs of behavioral deterioration, pacing obsessively, attacking feeding tools, lunging at staff. Experts call it zoochosis, a form of mental illness brought on by confinement and lack of environmental stimulation. Crocodiles, like many wild animals, aren't wired for captivity. They're wired for rivers, ambushes, and survival. Staff logs show multiple incidents involving Kuno: a broken fence panel in 2018, a food strike in 2019, an attempt to snap at a vet in 2020. Each time, the response was the same: downplay, deflect, move on. He was their star predator. Visitors loved him. Management needed him. But predators don't care about profit margins. And Kuno was evolving from misunderstood reptile to something far more volatile. And Rachel, she was getting closer, spending more time alone with him, ignoring the transformation, trusting the bond. But trust doesn't stop 1,200 pounds of instinct. July 29th, 2023. Started like any other Saturday at Lakeview Wildlife Sanctuary. The sky was cloudless, the heat unbearable, and the crowds bigger than usual. By 10 a.m., the sanctuary was buzzing. Families with strollers, cameras flashing, kids leaning over railings to get a better view. At the center of it, enclosure, the feeding demo was scheduled for noon. Rachel, as always, had volunteered at 11:30. She skipped lunch to prep the area, washing the feeding bins, checking gate locks, inspecting the enclosure perimeter. To her, it was just another routine. But something was different. Keuno was already at the edge of his pool, staring, still watching. His nostrils flared, his body low in the water like a coiled spring. Staff later said, Rachel joked about it. He's just excited, she'd smiled. He knows it's showtime. At 12 o'clock sharp, the demo began. A crowd of nearly 60 had gathered. Rachel stepped into the restricted zone. She stood behind the safety barrier, microphone in hand, confident, calm. She started her usual speech facts about Nile crocodiles, their ecological role, their misunderstood nature. It was rehearsed, familiar, the kind of thing she could do in her sleep. But then, the gate to the inner platform didn't latch properly, just one click short. Rachel didn't notice. She was too focused on the crowd, too relaxed in the routine. She walked forward to toss the first bucket of food, and that's when it happened. With terrifying speed, Kuno surged forward, not toward the food, toward Rachel. The faulty gate flew open, and in a blink, she was inside the enclosure. Gasps filled the air. Someone screamed. Rachel turned, but it was too late. Kuno lunged, his jaws clamped around her leg with a sickening crunch. Rachel screamed a sound people would later say still haunts them. She tried to crawl back, but the predator dragged her toward the pool. Chaos erupted. Guests fled. Staff rushed to respond. Emergency alarms blared. Someone threw a fire extinguisher. Another tried a tranquilizer dart. Nothing worked. Kuno was in a frenzy, whipping his body, thrashing Rachel like a rag doll in his teeth. Within 90 seconds, she was unconscious. Within 3 minutes, gone. The pool turned red. Rachel Monroe, trainer, advocate, optimist, was dead, killed by the animal she trusted most. The sanctuary closed its gates within the hour. Visitors were escorted out. Media vans arrived within minutes, and the staff shocked, sobbing. None were locked in a conference room and told not to speak to anyone. By nightfall, the news had gone national. Trainer killed by crocodile during live show. Caught on camera. Tragedy at Lakeview Sanctuary. Was this preventable? The footage grainy, shaky, filmed by a tourist, spread like wildfire. It showed Rachel stepping forward, the gate swinging open, the moment Kuno struck. It showed horror, blood, screams. But what it didn't show was the years of ignored warnings that led to that moment. Within 48 hours, the sanctuary statement was posted. We are devastated by the loss of our team member, Rachel Monroe. This is an active investigation, and we are cooperating fully with local authorities. No mention of prior complaints. No mention of internal failures. Just vague condolences and silence. But silence didn't work. Former employees began speaking out, some anonymously, others on the record. Stories surfaced of cut corners, skipped maintenance, overworked trainers, the faulty latch on the gate. Staff had flagged it 2 months earlier. It had never been replaced. Then came the paper trail, Emails, memos, reports, Rachel's own complaint, filed just weeks before her death, was discovered. In it, she described a growing sense of unease, Kuno's possessiveness, and her concern that he's no longer responding like he used to. The response? A polite dismissal. Continue monitoring. Maintain routine. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration launched an immediate investigation. So did the state's Wildlife Authority. The results were damning: multiple safety violations, ignored staff warnings, and a documented culture of prioritizing profits over precautions. Rachel's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit. Their demand: full accountability, not just for the faulty gate, but for the system that allowed it to be ignored. Meanwhile, Kuno was sedated and moved to an off-site holding facility. For the first time in his life, he was considered what he always had been, a wild animal. And for Rachel, the memorials began: flowers, candles, letters left outside the sanctuary gates. But grief wasn't enough. People wanted justice. And justice was only beginning. Rachel Monroe's death was the spark, but the fire had been smoldering for years. Within 6 months, Lakeview Wildlife Sanctuary was shut down permanently. Lawsuits mounted, sponsors withdrew, insurance coverage evaporated, and across the country, other facilities started asking uncomfortable questions. New legislation called Rachel's Law was introduced in 3 states. It mandated independent safety audits, banned solo interactions with Class 1 predators, and enforced mandatory reporting of behavioral red flags. It passed unanimously in 1. Animal rights groups rallied around her story. Protests erupted outside other sanctuaries with similar records. Online, a movement gained momentum. #Justice for Rachel trended for weeks. Former trainers came forward with stories just like hers, but the biggest shift came from the public. Attendance dropped, donations dried up, people stopped accepting tragedy. As the cost of entertainment, Rachel believed in the power of compassion to bridge the gap between humans and animals. She gave her life trying to prove that bond was real, but the truth: some animals aren't meant to be tamed, and no amount of love can erase 200 million years of instinct. If you believe Rachel's story deserves to be heard, share this video, because silence kills and her voice deserves to roar louder than her death.